Hi, this is Don Southerton, and a new episode of Everything Korea. We'll cover a number of topics today. But before I get started, I'm wearing my LL Beam shirt because it's rather chilly here in Colorado. Uh, so with that, let's just jump right in. It's been a couple weeks since CES. Uh, I've written a number of articles on it, and I will embed those links in the comments below. So, for those of you who want to drill a little deeper on what I see were the trends coming out of the show, please do so. But with that, one that really sort of stuck out in my mind was that in the past few years, we've seen sort of a shift from for many of the major automotive OEMs to be at CES. Uh, Originally, it was to sort of launch some of their new technologies that were tied into other technology providers, but it's been really sort of a trend the last few years. Not so this year. Most of the major OEMs did not participate, but that does not downplay or minimize the move toward electrification and autonomous, because most of the major and really sort of innovative providers of those technologies were very present there. So I think that's really a positive and very informative for those who have been watching this. One takeaway I would have from it is the collaboration going on today. In the past, and if we go back a century to, Henry Ford and his vertical integration of his automotive, empire. We've also seen more recently many of the OEMs being very, integrated on many levels. But the more recent trend and a big sort of, new trend, I would say, would be this collaboration going on. And we can see it at many different levels. In the last week, we've seen some dialogue out there about Apple looking for an OEM to build their car. We've also seen GM talking about and having an alliance with Microsoft. Those are really big level, but we have most of the major players and innovative providers are also building alliances with multiple partners, because that's really the wave of the future. That's going to be it. And it's this collaboration that's developing these new ecosystems. So it's something I'm watching very carefully and something I'm even participating in and supporting. So this is something I think, really stands out. The next thing that sort of popped up and has sort of that is, of course, with the election of President Biden, he must recently made an announcement where there'll be electrification of the U.S. government vehicles, and it's a massive number. And I have a couple thoughts on that. First, I think it's very positive, because what we've seen in countries like Korea several years ago and early on, when Korea wanted to support the electrification of vehicles, primarily Hyundais and Kias, the first and major purchaser of those vehicles has been the government. So it allows for a sort of subsidy of those OEMs so that they can jump into that sector, which is very expensive, and have at least a core customer. But I guess with the U.S., and there was another seminar, a webinar, and I'm attending a lot of the current cutting edge, innovative webinars out there right now to stay educated on this. But it was really interesting because there was one of the major ride providers of the country, rideshare providers, and they were saying, we're almost 100% ICE, or internal combustion engines. And their reason was, it wasn't that they were trying to avoid electrification. It's just that most of their services are being provided all over America, and in many, many markets, there's not the charging stations and the infrastructure there. Now, again, for those of us who live maybe in Colorado, and definitely those who live in California, we're seeing a lot of electrification coming in. In fact, we were back in California just after the holidays, and I thought it was really interesting because when we were there after the holidays, We'd been there in September, and I could see, even in that time frame, new charging stations popping up all over. And even in the middle of the Mojave Desert, when we were driving out, there was a bank of California, newly installed, charging stations. So very positive. And even here, I live in Golden, Colorado. I could see those. They're installing them in right on the street in parking areas. So very positive move and toward that. But that's not across America. And I think for a country, it's very important that they build that infrastructure. We're seeing it very much in Korea. Korea is much smaller geographically. But again, this is what's really going to be need for really to see this jump forward in electrification. So the takeaway, we need infrastructure. Again, the other part of this too is that when we're talking about these sectors like that, I think it's also what's sort of interesting, and this is a really Korea slant from this, is that the government there is not only subsidizing, as I mentioned earlier, they were subsidizing early entrance into electrification, infrastructure, but they also have a digital New Deal going on. And a lot of that New Deal, if you looked at it from the surface or just maybe reading an article on it, you would assume it's just to go and build it up for Korea. But really the caveat that is that it's really to go and support the transition from for vendors who've maybe been providing other services or maybe been in other sectors or been building ICE, a vendor for building the internal combustion, over to this newer sector. But it's for export. It's for taking this technology, developing in the country. But again, as Korea is such an export-driven country, it has to be first for domestic use, but then how do we take that and take it globally? So I think that's really, a big takeaway also there. So those 3 points this week, takeaways from CES, this climate, this ecosystem of collaboration, and finally, when you have programs where you're subsidizing and building a New Deal like in Korea, what is the long-term thing? Is it just for domestic use, or are you building stuff that you can go and sell globally, which I think is extremely important. As always, I'm here to answer any of your questions. Over in this corner right over here, I believe you will see a little subscribe. If you could hit in there and you can subscribe for me. And also up there's a little thing that you can hit and it will direct you to emailing me. So again, this is Don Southerton, wishing you all the best. Let's stay in touch and look forward for maybe another broadcast next week. Let's take care. Bye.